All right, guys, thanks for tuning in to Middle Class Reactions. Today we're going to go over a podcast I've been waiting on for a very long time, which is the Dave Smith and Lex Freedman. Dave Smith went on Lex Freedman's podcast. I'm probably going to do 4 or 5 videos on this podcast in different sections. It was a 3 hour and 20 minute podcast, 3 hour and 19 minutes. There's a lot here I want to go over. Specifically, Israel Gaza, which is what this video is going to be over. Russia Ukraine, which I severely disagree with Lex on overall. He makes some good points, but overall, I just disagree with him on that. So I want to go over that, the Epstein stuff. So yeah, there's multiple things, but this is one of the first times, besides on JRE, that Dave Smith really deep dives further into Israel Gaza than he has previously, and I also like seeing Lex Friedman's pushback on it, specifically because Lex Friedman just had on Douglas Murray. Now, I like Douglas Murray on a lot of things. The Israel Gaza thing and the Russia Ukraine thing are not one of them. I think his takes are just wrong. But who am I to challenge that? So yeah, let's take a look. If you haven't watched this podcast, I'll link it down below in the description. I suggest anyone go and watch it. I have watched it start to finish, one full watch through, and then another about half. So yeah, I suggest everybody go watch this. Now let's go. Let's take a listen and see what's going on.
Talk about it
Sure.
since you brought it up. October 7th. So, what exactly do you think about the October 7th attack by Hamas on Israel?
Well, I mean, like what I just said, that it was horrible, and it's always by the same logic that I'm giving you now. It's always evil to target innocent civilians. I don't believe civilians can be held responsible for the crimes of their government. This was, by the way, the Osama bin Laden logic, which I think would also be the logic of like Bill Clinton or George W. Bush or Barack Obama. But Osama bin Laden very explicitly said when he was asked, like, well, are you just going to target like U.S. military sites or are you targeting U.S. civilians? It was an interview in the 90s before 9/11. Um, and he goes, no, civilians are fair game too, because you guys have regular elections and you guys vote for your government, and therefore you're responsible for the crimes that they commit. Now, I think that's the logic of a fanatic like Osama bin Laden, and that's not the logic that any of us should follow. It doesn't make any sense, and it's not true that people are responsible for the crimes of their government. I think that that same argument is used quite a bit by people on the pro-Israeli side when they say like, oh, they had an election in 2005 and Hamas won a plurality. Therefore, 20 years later, they have no rights. I think that's insane. So, okay, so Hamas had no right to go after civilians. It's horrible, and you see, these teenagers being killed and the people you see the images of people who are held hostage for all this time, so it's like your heart breaks for those people. It's truly tragic. I do think that it was in many ways an indictment of so many different things. Like October 7th happening was an indictment of the entire occupation slash siege of Gaza and the West Bank, for that matter. It was, I think, should have probably forever destroyed the legacy of Benjamin Netanyahu, who is, I mean, this isn't like George W. Bush, you know, I mean, he was on the job for almost a year when 9/11 happened, but it was still kind of new, like it was still kind of in his first year of being president. Benjamin Netanyahu was the longest serving prime minister in Israeli history and had explicitly been like, I'm the tough right winger who's going to be tough on these Palestinians, who's going to like move away from the idea of coming to a two-state solution because this is what we need to keep us safe. Like the justification is like, I'm going to be hard on these motherfuckers because I know what it takes to keep us safe. And that culminates in the worst massacre in Israeli history. Um, And then, I mean, the other big one is that, I mean, and it's not like I wouldn't even say an open secret at this point. It's just out in the open. He had this strategy of propping up Hamas for years. And so he had this strategy of propping up Hamas for a myriad of reasons. But a major part of it was that, look, man, as long as there's terrorists in power there, there's never going to be any pressure on us to give the Palestinians a state because, look, are you telling me I got to negotiate with them?
He was allowing Qatar.
So, in case y'all don't know, that last part that Dave Smith just went over there, that Benjamin Netanyahu has empowered Hamas. One is undeniable. It is true. I mean, it's not arguable that did happen. I would argue still does, but neither here nor there. The funny thing is that it's the same exact thing that happened with ISIS during the Obama administration. Obama funded ISIS and funded the Taliban, and then look what happened. It came back and bite us in the ass. And then now, Benjamin Netanyahu did the same thing with Hamas, and he openly admitted it. So, like I said, that's not even arguable. Yeah, for some reason, a lot of people don't know that happened, but yeah, that absolutely happened.
Our money to float.
Insisting that Qatar money float to them. When the Qatar money dried up, sent the Mossad in to insist that it gets back to them. Hundreds of millions of dollars, briefcases in cash. And he said in his own words that the reason for doing this was to his words were prop up Hamas, bolster Hamas, to keep them in power so that the West Bank and the Gazans were divided,
Yeah.
and that the international community, as well as the liberal Jewish community in Israel, wouldn't be able to put pressure on them to make a deal.
But what are the options? So if he doesn't allow the money in, it also looks really bad for him. Because if he's not allowing the money in, that means he's not allowing the quote unquote aid in to help the Palestinians.
Yeah, but Lex, I mean, the dynamic here, right, is from 2007 to today. Israel's had a full blockade around the country. They won't let potatoes in. They won't let sugar in. They won't. And the justification is because they're dual use. You know, they can be used to make rockets as well as they can be used to, feed starving children. So we can't let that in because it's dual use. But cash to Hamas, does that not have dual usage? Like, is there nothing else that they can? So yeah, it's like, yes, when you have a full blockade around the country, you take on certain responsibilities. And I think this is the essence of really the whole struggle here, which is very tough, I think, for the pro-Israel side to grapple with. But the bottom line is that Israel hasn't occupied Palestine for like a few months after a war, or even a couple of years after a war, while they're figuring out what we're going to do with them. It's been over 60 years. We're talking about a 1 week long war, or a day short of a week long war, in 1967. Israel's had control of them ever since. And much like in the same way that, like, if you kidnap someone and you lock them in your basement and you don't feed them, you murdered that person. So, in other words, stated differently, you're not allowed to kidnap people and lock them in your basement. But once you do, you take on a responsibility to feed those people. You know what I mean? Like, you're not allowed to keep someone and not feed them. That is a worse charge than just keeping them. And so, yeah, anyway, I guess my point is, the solution to that, if you go like, well, I'm a bad guy if I fund Hamas, I'm a bad guy if I don't let the aid in, was to let the reputable international aid organizations bring aid in to the people of Gaza. Don't pressure the Qataris to send in briefcases full of cash. Allow internationally recognized, reputable human rights organizations who are lining up trying to do it, stop turning them away and let them in. And this is just, it's so long past due. I mean, like, it's
That's the other thing, and I hear or see this argument quite a bit. Is like, oh, Netanyahu's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. He can't win. It's like, no, he could win here. Like, he obviously could win. He just chose not to. Like, he openly chose the thing that would hurt the Palestinian people, and now is coming back to bite Israel in the ass. Like, he openly chose that. It was intentional, and that is what is crazy.
just, well, I'm not like defending Arab terrorism. It's I think it's really it's a tragedy that the Arabs embraced terrorism. I don't think it's unique to them, and in fact, I think it was the Zionist militias who introduced terrorism to that part of the world. But there was also like there look, terrorism persists because it works. And this is true with state terrorism and with non-state terrorism. It's like terrorism has often worked for people. I think the thing like early Yasser Arafat, I know, was very influenced by the Algerians who, successfully kicked the French out at embracing terrorism. And it was almost like the major miscalculation of those Palestinian Arabs who did embrace terrorism was that this isn't the French. This isn't the French hanging out in some colony with their home country back home, where maybe a few acts of violence could work enough to, the liberal population back home is like, oh, I really didn't like the response to that terrorism. We killed so many people. Forget it. This is too much of a headache. Let's get out of here. The Zionist settlers were there to stay. They weren't going anywhere. They weren't going back to Eastern Europe. You know what I mean? They were just that. And so it's a tragedy that this whole thing went the way it did. But you always, whenever you're talking about like a conflict like this, the person who has the party who has the power is the one who needs to make concessions, and it's just indefensible that the status quo of the Palestinian people having no rights, literally no rights, being ruled by a government that they do not get to vote for or against, no right to do commerce with the outside world, no freedom of travel, no freedom of movement, no basic property rights. You can be kicked out of your home at any time, no right to a fair trial, no right to a lawyer, no right to a jury of your peers. I mean, the fact that that has been the status quo since 1967 is just indefensible. And if
The other thing about it, that is by definition like prison or a concentration camp. It's both. By definition. At minimum, a prison. That's the other thing. Like, and I'm not pro Hamas by any stretch. But on the Palestinians people side of things, like, if you do something like that since 1967, what do you think's going to happen? And honestly, can you blame them? Like, do you not know what led to World War II? Was after World War One, we were pretty much encircled Germany and was making fun of them. They're the laughing stock of Europe. And then look, I mean, that's part of the reason that caused World War II. And then now, obviously, this isn't a world war, but you subjugated people to a prison that's 5 miles wide by 25 miles long. Then you're shocked when they do some terroristic attack on you, and then you're shocked when the people who are cheering for that, like, you're shocked that they're happy that their government I don't think it's a government, but whatever, that Hamas got like a win over Israel. You're gonna be shocked that that happened. I just don't understand the logic.
And then in the context that has been the status quo, I guess I'm just not, even though I'm against it, it's kind of like when you're just lecturing about the way in which they resist this, I think it's very tough to be on a strong moral footing,
Yeah, you have to really empathize with decades of suffering.
Yeah.
In the region. I suppose my question was grounded in how can the Israeli government, how can the world help the Palestinian people flourish? So you suggested allowing reputable aid organizations in, but that's kind of almost patching.
Yeah.
It's just helping humans who are suffering, but that's not how you have a nation flourish. You have to build up the infrastructure. You have to build up a culture of the education system, the you know democratic processes of electing and regular elections, and so that the people are represented. And you have to form partnerships, friendships, normalization of relations with the Arab world, with Israel. You can travel back and forth, and lessen the chokehold. like the security chokehold,
Yeah.
that you could say is justified in a militaristic situation, but why is it a military situation? The question is there, like, where do we go from here? If we, we'll talk about Netanyahu some more. He is he's very criticized inside Israel as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe less so after October 7th because you know, again, in the same way you can empathize with the Palestinian people, you can empathize with Israelis, where October 7th touched, just like it did for Americans with 9/11, it touched some kind of primal
Yeah,
thing
100%.
of fear, of like,
Oh yeah, and like
holy shit.
the same thing I said before, like I could also very easily go if one of my kids was like at that rave or something like that and just got gunned down or kidnapped by, I could understand being like level the whole goddamn place, and I'm sure I would feel that way if that was one of my kids, you know. So yeah. No, that's exactly right. I mean,
That's the most fair argument to me to make on the Israel side for what's happening. And I agree with Dave and Lex on this, where it's like, I would feel that way, you know? Like, I don't have kids, but I have a 6-year-old niece. If she was at a, baseball game and, say, Russia or Iran bombed that area for whatever reason, and she was killed in the process, I'd be like, yeah, glass, I turn them into glass, nuke them. I don't care. I don't care who dies. I don't care how many innocents. Like, it does not matter to me. Just glass them. So, like, I do get that from the Israeli side of things. You also have to look at that from the Palestinian side of things, where it's like, if you have a son, daughter, brother, sister, mom, mom, dad, cousin, whatever, that you've had killed by Israel, and then the same government who killed him has been subjugating you for, 60 years, 70 years almost, you'd also be like, yeah, I don't care if their kids died. My kid died 10 years ago. Like, payback sucks. That's what makes this war so nasty, is that it's literally just it's a you got me, I'm going to get you. All wars are that way to an extent, but this one, the civilian population per combatant kill is just so off. And I've seen the reports that say, like, oh, this is the most moral war that's ever been fought. No one truly knows the numbers, because if you look at pictures of Gaza, it's leveled. Like, it is flat. It's just, can we, you know what? Let me do this. We'll just look it up real quick. Well, we will take a look as soon as that loads. So, I mean, and the other thing is that, like, it's never gonna end as long as both sides are killing each other's kids, you know? I don't know why it's taking so long. Here we go. Internet's just taking a second. As soon as that loads, I'll pull it up. But, it's like, I mean, if I came and killed some of your kids, what would you do to my family, And it'd be kind of fair. Like, it'd be kind of understandable. So you can kind of see, like, is this one loaded in? Yeah, look at that. It is just flattened. Like, can y'all see that? There, yeah. It's just flat. Like, it was this a nice, like, not nice, but very compact city, and now it is just completely flattened. It is just disgusting what has happened there.
there's lots of examples in the world of like France and Germany are right next to each other, and Ireland and England are right next to each other, and they're just totally living in harmony right now. Like there is just the thought of them going to war is like inconceivable right now. Not saying it could never happen in the future, but it seems pretty hard to imagine. And that being the case would have been very hard to imagine for a very long time. Like there's some serious levels of brutality between those two societies, and even more directly involved. Egypt and Israel went to war 4 times in a couple decades.
Pause that for a sec so you can read that here.
They went to war.
There you
War, and then in the late 70s they made a land for peace deal, and they haven't been to war since.
go. Pause that if you want to read it. Move myself back down there. There we go.
And like I do at least try to hold out that like that is it's not like Egypt is, you're not going to say they don't have an issue with radical Islam in Egypt. You know what I mean? Like that's not the answer. It's just that they made a land for peace deal, and once that wasn't that was solved, it was kind of easier to avoid the war. And I do like to think that there could be a solution to the Israel-Palestine question, but the it's going to have to involve Israel taking their boot off of the Palestinians' neck. And I know that that's scary. And I understand that there are like legitimate concerns about that. There's was the great Thomas Jefferson quote about slavery, which was we have the wolf by the tail, and we can neither afford to hold on to him nor risk letting him go. Which is like, you could see where that would have been like a real concern of people, like right toward the end of slavery, or whatever, in the early 1800s, say the first half of the 19th century, where you'd be like, okay, we recognize this is wrong now, but we've had these millions of people enslaved for all these years. If we let them go, they're going to fucking kill us. And what are you saying? They're citizens now, meaning the Second Amendment applies to them, meaning that the guy who I enslaved now can get a gun? You know what's and so okay, there are but I think in hindsight, looking back at it, we would all just go, yeah, but you can't enslave people. So like whatever risks come with the next phase of this, unfortunately, like you're going to have to just deal with that, and move. You have to start with abolishing slavery.
And it is good to also remember, in the hopeful message you send, like at any day you can make a deal. That's one of the frustrating things I had with I hosted a debate on Israel. It's like, it just felt hopeless, and a lot of people I talk to, it feels hopeless. But like, I have a lot of I maybe naively see a lot of possibilities of peace there. I see, for example, normalization of relations with Saudi Arabia and Israel, and then Saudi Arabia taking some ownership over Gaza, something like that. Some interesting.
That to me is the most realistic scenario. You get Israel and Hamas out of it completely, and then you can have someone like Gaza, or not Gaza. You can have someone like Saudi Arabia come in, or Egypt come in and take control of it. That to me is the smartest solution.
Uh, where a big major player in that region takes ownership and steps as the middleman.
Yeah, I agree with you, and you're 100% right that, and even before October 7th, I think many steps had been taken away from the peace process and the feeling of that. I mean, really, I think since the second Intifada is when like the appetite for peace, I think, in Israel was greatly diminished. Um, there, but to your point, I mean, it's going to take really painful concessions on all sides in order to get there. And I think that the personally, I think, and I don't know if I say this for the not necessarily like the Arab world, um, but at least the nation states, like their governments, I think are pretty much there. Like Saudi Arabia and UAE and Jordan and Egypt. Like if the Israelis, they're almost like, look, these are American sock puppets, for the most part, right? And so their thing is that like, okay, 100% of my population is completely opposed to what Israel's doing to Palestine right now. and they just hate that that the nation was created at all, that all the Arabs were kicked out of what is, very important land to them religiously. And so the governments there are like, look, we want to continue to have US tax dollars flooding in here. We'd love to make a deal with Israel, but like, you gotta stop doing this to the Palestinians so my own people don't rise up against me. So I think as long if the Israelis were like, fine, we'll do a two-state.
That's a fair point. I mean, we do fund literally all those countries that surround Israel, including Iran. We send them a lot of money. We might not be now. Trump just ended a lot of aid to Afghanistan, the Taliban, and I think Iran. But pre-Trump, pre-2025 Trump, we were giving a lot of money to Iran, like a lot.
Solution or something like that. I think Saudi Arabia couldn't wait to broker. In fact, they proposed a two-state solution just a few years ago. I mean, they would love to be a part of that and normalize relations. Amongst the Palestinians, like, which again, I think this had been accepted multiple times, at least by their leadership. It's like, yeah, you're gonna have to accept that, like, you lost in 48. You're going to have to accept that you lost in 47. You're going to have to accept that the state of Israel does exist. And you're going to have to accept that, like, the right of return is not going to literally mean that everybody can go back to where they were. And what Israel's going to have to concede is that it was awfully fucked up that they kicked a lot of people out of their land, and that the whole a land for a people without land was never true. That was just a slogan that felt good to avoid what you guys actually did. And the fact that it was inexcusable that you guys occupied these people for 60 years, and that has to end immediately.
I interviewed Douglas Murray recently. He just wrote a book on Israel and Hamas called On Democracies and Death Cults. He makes what I think is a strong pro-Israel case, focusing on Hamas as a...
Guys, I'm going to stop this video on that because I'm going to do a separate video specifically on the Douglas Murray side of this with Dave Smith as well. So I'm going to pause it right there. Let me see. Yeah, so specifically going to do a video over the Douglas Murray thing. I didn't do a lot of talking during this video specifically because I really don't disagree with Dave on anything here. I really, really think it's good to hear his point on this because it's true. Like, you can't just subjugate the Palestinians the whole time, So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm not going to do a whole lot of input on that one. I agree wholeheartedly with Dave on this subject. So yeah, that's where we're at. Thanks for tuning in to Middle Class Reactions. Like, share, subscribe, do all the things you know you need to, and y'all have a great night.